She didn't sleep, Your Majesty. She kept us breathing. The pup's voice was so small that, for one terrible second, Alpha King Nathaniel Blackwood thought the wind had spoken from inside the frozen cave. Dawn had barely touched the frost pine woods, turning the snow pale blue beneath the cliffs, and the storm that had raged all night still whispered through the trees like a warning. Nathaniel stood at the entrance with 6 royal guards behind him, his black coat dusted white, his silver-gray eyes fixed on the sight before him. 9 wolf pups lay huddled in a circle beneath a torn wool cloak, their tiny bodies pressed close together for warmth. Some were asleep. Some trembled. One blinked up at him with wide amber eyes, cheeks wet with melted frost. And beside them, curled around them like the last wall between life and winter, lay Claire Whitman, the Luna he had banished 3 nights ago. Her honey-brown hair was tangled against the stone floor. Her lips had lost their color. Her hands, usually warm enough to calm even the wildest newborn wolf, were tucked protectively around the smallest pup, as though even unconscious, she refused to let go. Nathaniel did not move. Kings were taught not to freeze. Alphas were taught never to show shock in front of their wolves. But the breath left his chest as if the mountain itself had struck him. Claire. Her name almost broke in his throat. For 3 days, he had told himself she had run because guilt made cowards flee. For 3 days, he had let the court whisper that his Luna had betrayed Blackwood, that she had guided enemies through royal patrol roads, that she had abandoned her crown when judgment came near. He had believed the evidence because it was easier than believing the softness in her eyes could survive in a world built to crush it. Now that softness lay before him in the snow, half frozen, surrounded by 9 living children who should never have survived the night. The smallest pup stirred against her arm and tried to stand. Nathaniel stepped forward at once, but the pup shrank back, not from fear of him exactly, but from the instinct of a child who had spent too many hours afraid of every shadow beyond the cave mouth. Easy, Nathaniel said, lowering himself to one knee. His voice, the voice that had silenced war councils and rival alphas, came out softer than anyone behind him had ever heard. No one will hurt you. The pup looked from him to Claire, then swallowed. She said that too. Nathaniel's eyes lowered to Claire's wrist. Beneath a streak of frost and dirt, the old Luna mark glowed faintly silver, dim as moonlight trapped under ice. It should have gone dark when he cast her out. It should have faded when the pack turned its back on her. Instead, it had burned through the longest night of the year, keeping 9 pups warm while Claire's own strength slipped away inch by inch. One of the guards whispered a prayer. Another turned his face aside. Nathaniel barely heard them. He reached out and touched Claire's shoulder with the care of a man afraid the world might break her again if he breathed too hard. Her skin was cold, but not lifeless. A pulse beat beneath his fingertips, weak and stubborn, just like the woman who had once stood in his throne room and said kindness was not weakness, even when every noble wolf laughed at her for it. Nathaniel bowed his head until his forehead nearly touched the torn cloak covering the pups. In that cave, with the storm dying behind him and the truth rising like fire in his chest, the Alpha King understood the first and worst mistake of his reign. He had searched the kingdom for a traitor. Instead, he had found his missing Luna lying beside 9 pups she had kept alive all night. 3 nights earlier, Claire Whitman stood alone in the center of Blackwood Hall while every candle in the throne room seemed to burn colder around her. The great chamber was filled with wolves who had once bowed when she passed, nobles in dark silk, captains in polished armor, servants pretending not to stare. Above them, the moon windows reflected silver light across the black marble floor, making the room look less like a palace and more like a frozen lake. Claire kept her hands folded in front of her, though her fingers wanted to tremble. She could feel the weight of their judgment pressing against her skin, heavy as wet wool. At the far end of the hall, Alpha King Nathaniel Blackwood sat upon the obsidian throne, still as a statue carved from winter. His dark hair framed a face too controlled to read, but his silver-gray eyes gave him away. They were not empty. They were wounded. That hurt her more than the whispers. Vanessa Hale stood 3 steps below the throne, dressed in pale blue, her golden hair pinned with pearls, her expression shaped into perfect sorrow. In her gloved hands, she held a folded patrol map and 3 letters sealed with Claire's private mark. "I did not write those," Claire said, her voice quiet but clear. A few wolves shifted. Someone breathed out a bitter laugh. Vanessa lowered her gaze as if the accusation pained her. "My Luna, I wish that were true." The title sounded respectful, but Claire heard the poison beneath it. Nathaniel's hand tightened on the arm of the throne. "The Eastern Patrol Road was exposed," he said. "The convoy route was changed without my command. That seal belongs to you." Claire looked at him then, truly looked, searching for the man who had once crossed an entire ballroom because she had looked overwhelmed, the man who had placed a silver scarf around her shoulders and told her she never had to become cruel to be strong. "Then someone used what belonged to me," she said. "Nathaniel, you know me." The throne room went so silent that the flames seemed to stop moving. No one used the king's given name before the court. No one but his Luna. For a heartbeat, something broke through his mask. Pain. Doubt. A memory of softer days. Then Vanessa spoke again, gentle as falling snow. "Love can blind even the strongest king." Claire turned toward her. "And envy can teach a liar how to sound innocent." A ripple moved through the hall. Vanessa's eyes flashed, but only for a second. Then she pressed a hand to her heart as though Claire had wounded her with words alone. Nathaniel rose. The movement silenced everyone. He descended the steps slowly, each footfall echoing through the chamber. Claire wanted him to come closer and take her hand. She wanted him to ask one question without the court listening. She wanted one private breath where truth still had a chance. Instead, he stopped several feet away, close enough for her to see the exhaustion beneath his anger. "I will not spill royal blood on rumor," he said. "And I will not condemn without trial." Hope rose in her chest, fragile and bright. Then his voice hardened. "But until the truth is proven, you will leave Blackwood Palace." The hope vanished so quickly she almost swayed. "Leave? Before I forget you were once mine." The words did not come loudly. They did not need to. They crossed the marble between them and settled into Claire's heart with a coldness no winter could match. Around her, the nobles lowered their eyes, some satisfied, some ashamed, none brave enough to speak. Claire reached for the silver scarf at her wrist, the one he had given her, and held it like a last thread between them. She could have begged. She could have fallen to her knees and pleaded for the court to believe her. But Claire had spent her life learning that dignity was sometimes the only shelter left to the accused. So she lifted her chin, though her eyes shone. "One day," she whispered, "you will know I stayed loyal even when you stopped looking for the truth." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Vanessa looked away to hide the smallest smile. And Claire walked out of Blackwood Hall with no guard beside her, no cloak on her shoulders, and no one in the entire palace brave enough to say that their Luna was leaving alone into the snow. Claire did not return to her chambers. She knew better than to walk back through those velvet halls, past servants who would suddenly remember errands in the opposite direction, past guards who would look at the floor because pity was safer than loyalty. Instead, she crossed the western corridor with the same quiet steps she had used on her first day in Blackwood Palace, when every archway had seemed too grand for a girl from a small mountain pack. The palace had not changed. The black stone still shone like polished midnight. The banners still carried Nathaniel's silver wolf. The winter roses still climbed the inner courtyard walls, pale and stubborn against the cold. Only Claire had changed in the eyes of everyone inside it. Once, she had been Luna. Now she was a problem being removed before dinner. At the servants' entrance, an older maid named Ruth stood with a folded bundle pressed to her chest. Her eyes were red, but her mouth stayed firm. "You will need this, my lady." Claire looked down. Inside the bundle were a plain wool coat, a small pouch of dried herbs, 2 rolls of bandages, a tin of salve, and a heel of bread wrapped in linen. For one dangerous moment, Claire nearly cried. Not because it was much, but because it was kindness, and kindness always found the places cruelty had left open. "Ruth, if they see you helping me, then I was cleaning the storage room and misplaced a coat. The maid pushed the bundle into her hands. You helped my grandson when the fever took him. Let an old woman repay a debt. Claire squeezed her hand, unable to trust her voice. Outside, snow fell softly over the rear steps, quiet as ash. No royal carriage waited. No escort had been assigned. No horse had been saddled. The message was clear enough. She was allowed to leave, but not honored enough to be protected. Claire pulled the wool coat around her shoulders and started down the service road toward the Frostpine Woods, each step carrying her farther from the only home she had ever dared to hope was hers. By the time the palace lights faded behind the trees, her breath had become white mist in the dark. The road curved along the lower ridge for almost 2 miles before splitting toward the border settlements. Claire chose the narrow path instead of the main trail. It was colder, but quieter, and she could not bear the thought of meeting travelers who might recognize the fallen Luna walking alone beneath a borrowed coat. In her pocket, her fingers found the silver scarf Nathaniel had once tied around her wrist. She remembered that night too clearly, the spring festival lanterns, the music, his voice low beside her ear as he said, "You do not have to be loud to be powerful, Claire." She had believed him. She had believed that he saw her. Now the scarf felt less like a promise and more like a question she did not know how to answer. Hours passed. The wind sharpened. The pines grew dense enough to swallow the moonlight, and somewhere far off an owl called once, then fell silent. Claire stopped near an old marker stone to rest, pressing one hand against the rough bark of a cedar. That was when she heard it. Not a howl. Not a warning. A small, broken sound drifting through the trees. A child crying. Claire lifted her head, every tired thought gone still. The sound came again, thin and frightened, nearly hidden beneath the wind. She should have kept walking. She had no guard, no standing, no reason to risk herself for a kingdom that had just cast her out. But the cry trembled through the dark a third time, and Claire's heart answered before fear could stop it. She stepped off the path, clutching her bag of herbs against her side, and followed the sound deeper into Frostpine. The sound led Claire down a slope slick with ice and pine needles, away from the marked trail and into a part of Frostpine where the trees grew close enough to scrape the sky. She moved carefully, one hand brushing trunks for balance, the other holding the little pouch Ruth had given her. The crying faded, then returned, weaker this time, and Claire's chest tightened with every second of silence between the sounds. "I am coming," she whispered, though she did not know who could hear her. The wind shifted. Beneath the clean scent of snow and cedar, she caught something sharper, fear, overturned earth, and the faint warmth of young wolves. Claire pushed through a curtain of frozen branches and stopped at the edge of a narrow ravine. Below, half buried in drifting snow, lay the remains of a small covered wagon. One wheel had broken loose. The canvas top had collapsed under the weight of the storm. Wooden crates were scattered across the ground, some marked with the crests of Allied packs from the northern border. It was not a merchant wagon. It was a protected transport, the kind used to carry pups and caretakers between winter shelters when roads became too dangerous for walking. Claire's stomach turned cold. "Hello?" she called softly. "Can anyone hear me?" For a moment, only the snow answered. Then a tiny face appeared beneath the sagging canvas, pale cheeks streaked with frost, amber eyes round with terror. A little boy, no older than 5 in human form, stared at her as if he had forgotten what hope looked like. "Please," he breathed. "My sister is cold." Claire slid down the ravine before fear could measure the danger. Her boots sank nearly to her ankles, and her knees hit the snow hard enough to sting, but she barely felt it. "It is all right," she said, forcing her voice to stay calm. "My name is Claire. I am going to help you." The boy's lower lip trembled. "Are you at the bad wolves?" "No." She reached the wagon and crouched low. "I am with you." That was enough. A soft sob broke from somewhere inside the wreckage. Then another. Claire lifted the fallen canvas and found them huddled beneath splintered boards and blankets gone stiff with cold. 9 pups. Some in human form, some half-shifted from fear, all too young to understand why the grown-ups who had promised safety were gone. The oldest looked maybe 9 years old. The youngest could not have been more than 2. Claire swallowed the ache rising in her throat and began counting under her breath because numbers gave panic something to hold. 1 near the wheel, shivering but awake. 2 under the blue blanket. 3 curled beside a cracked crate. 4 clutching a wooden toy wolf. 5 with a scraped cheek and brave eyes. 6 and 7 pressed together, twins by their matching dark curls. 8, the little girl the boy had mentioned, too still for Claire's comfort. 9, a small pup trapped beneath a broken bench, whimpering each time he tried to move. "Listen to me," Claire said, looking at the oldest child. "What is your name?" "Mason," he whispered. "Mason, I need you to help me keep everyone awake." "Can you do that?" His chin shook, but he nodded. Claire took off her borrowed coat and wrapped it around the smallest 2 pups first. The cold bit through her dress immediately, but she ignored it. She checked tiny hands, cold noses, shallow breaths. She spoke each child's name as Mason gave it to her, making them real, making them stay. Lily. Owen. Grace. Noah. Sophie. Jack. Emma. Caleb. Mason. The names became a prayer in the ravine. From her pouch, Claire pulled the bandages, the salve, the dried herbs. She cleaned what she could, warmed little fingers between her palms, and murmured promises she had no right to make. "You are safe now. Stay with me. Keep breathing." Above the ravine, somewhere beyond the trees, a branch snapped. Claire went still. The pups felt it too. Every small body froze. Mason's eyes lifted to hers, wide with a fear too old for his face. "They said they would come back," he whispered. Claire looked toward the dark ridge, then back at the 9 children trembling beneath the ruined wagon. The main road was too far. The palace was farther. The storm was growing heavier by the minute. But she had seen a cave on the slope when she climbed down, half hidden behind a wall of ice and roots. It was not safety, not truly. It was only shelter. Sometimes shelter was the first miracle. Claire gathered the smallest pup into her arms and looked at Mason. "Then we will not be here when they return." Claire moved the children one by one through the rising snow, choosing the order by who could still stand and who needed to be carried. Mason insisted he could walk, though his small legs shook with every step, so she gave him a task instead of an argument. "Hold Lily's hand and keep your eyes on me." He nodded with the solemn courage of a child trying hard not to be afraid. The cave waited halfway up the slope, a dark mouth hidden behind pine roots and a curtain of ice. It was no more than 20 yards from the broken wagon, but the storm made that distance feel endless. Claire carried Emma first, the youngest, tucked beneath the borrowed coat with only her little nose showing. Then she went back for Caleb, whose ankle would not hold him. Then Grace, whose hands were too numb to grip. Each trip stole more warmth from Claire's body, but each child inside the cave meant the cold had one less life to claim. By the time the 9th pup crossed the threshold, dusk had swallowed the ravine. Claire gathered fallen branches, strips of canvas, and loose blankets from the wagon. She built a small barrier at the cave entrance to slow the wind, then spread every scrap of fabric across the stone floor. "Everyone close together," she said. "Like a pack pile. That is it. Shoulder to shoulder." Sophie sniffled. "Are you our Luna?" The question struck Claire so gently and so deeply that she almost forgot how cold she was. Once, the word had belonged to her like a crown. Now it sounded like something holy coming from a child who did not know she had lost the right to wear it. Claire brushed snow from Sophie's curls. "Tonight, I am just Claire." Noah, the boy with the wooden toy wolf, looked toward the entrance. "Will the king come?" Claire's throat tightened. "The king protects his people." "Then why is he not here?" No one meant to hurt her. Children asked the questions adults were too careful to say aloud. Claire turned to the small bundle of herbs in her lap and crushed them between her palms, releasing the sharp green scent into the cave. Because sometimes even kings arrive late, she whispered. But that does not mean we stop fighting to stay alive. Outside, the wind shifted again. This time it carried voices. Low. Searching. Too far away for words, close enough for fear. The pups went silent at once. Claire raised one finger to her lips, then took a handful of snow from near the cave mouth and rubbed it over the entrance stones, dulling the warm scent of frightened children. She scattered pine needles, broke a pouch of bitter herbs, and pressed her own scarf against a scrape on her arm until the fabric carried her scent more strongly than theirs. Mason watched her with wide eyes. What are you doing? Giving them something else to follow. But they will find you. Claire tied the silver scarf around a branch and looked down the slope into the deepening blue of the storm. Her heart beat hard, not because she wanted to live less, but because she knew exactly how much life still waited behind her in that cave. 9 tiny breaths. 9 futures. 9 reasons to be braver than fear. Stay inside, she told Mason. No matter what you hear. Lily began to cry, and Claire crossed back to cup her cheek. Sweetheart, listen to me. I need you to count everyone's breathing. Can you do that for me? Lily nodded, tears clinging to her lashes. Claire smiled, though her lips felt stiff. Good girl. Then she stepped outside and pulled the branch barrier back into place behind her. Snow whirled around her like a white ocean. The voices grew clearer near the ravine, rough with frustration, calling to one another through the trees. Claire did not run toward them. She walked just far enough for her footprints to show, then dropped the scarf where moonlight could catch its silver edge. A shadow moved between the pines. Claire lifted her chin, every inch the Luna they had tried to erase, and let the storm carry her scent away from the cave. Claire did not know how long she stayed outside the cave. Time became wind, snow, breath, and the careful sound of her own footsteps circling away from the children. She moved through the trees slowly at first, leaving a trail clear enough to be followed, then doubled back over stones where the snow could not hold her prints. Twice, she heard movement behind her. Twice, she forced herself not to look back. Fear wanted her to run. Love made her think. She brushed her hand along cedar bark, scattered more bitter herbs near the ravine, and tied a strip of torn fabric to a low branch where any searching wolf would pause. The storm helped her, swallowing shape and scent, turning every shadow into another shadow. When the voices finally drifted away toward the lower ridge, Claire let herself breathe. Her legs shook so hard she had to lean against a pine tree for several seconds, her palm pressed to the rough bark, her eyes closed against the sting of cold. She could have kept walking then. The border trail was somewhere beyond the western slope. If she followed it until morning, she might reach a settlement where no one knew her face, no one knew the scandal, no one knew that the king had sent his Luna into the snow with nothing but a borrowed coat and a wounded heart. But behind her, inside the cave, 9 children were waiting for her promise to come true. Claire turned back. By the time she reached the hidden entrance, her hair was stiff with frost and her hands had gone almost numb. Mason pulled the branch barrier aside just enough to see her. His face crumpled with relief. You came back. Claire slipped inside and lowered the barrier behind her. I said I would. The cave was colder than before. The little pile of bodies had shifted restlessly, the pups pressed together beneath the torn blankets, their breath rising in thin white threads. Lily was still counting softly, touching each shoulder as she whispered the numbers, but her voice had grown sleepy. Claire knelt beside them and knew at once that they could not make it through the night like this. The wind had found cracks in the stone. The blankets were damp. The smallest pups were fading into that dangerous quiet where fear became exhaustion and exhaustion pretended to be peace. No sleeping yet, Claire said gently, rubbing Emma's tiny hands between her own. Stay with me, sweetheart. Emma's lashes fluttered but did not open. Caleb whimpered. Sophie curled tighter against Mason's side. Claire looked at the herb pouch. Almost empty. The bandages. Almost gone. The coat. Already wrapped around 3 children. There was nothing left to give except herself. So Claire moved into the center of the group and gathered them close, one by one, arranging them against her body and beneath her arms, pressing their cold hands to her waist, tucking little faces near her shoulder where they could feel her breathing. "Listen to my heartbeat," she whispered. "Match it if you can." Mason stared at her wrist. The old Luna mark beneath her skin had begun to glow again, faint silver pulsing in time with her heart. "Claire," he breathed, "your hand." She looked down, and for the first time that night, true fear flickered through her. The mark had not answered her since Nathaniel turned away from her in the throne room. Now it warmed with a light that hurt and comforted at once, as though the moon itself had found her in the dark and asked what she was willing to surrender. Emma's breath hitched. Then stopped for one endless second. Claire's world narrowed to that tiny stillness. She pulled the child closer, pressing both hands over Emma's back. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Take my warmth. Take anything. Just live." The silver light spread from Claire's wrist into her palms, soft and bright, filling the cave with the glow of moonlight on fresh snow. Emma gasped, small and startled, then drew in a trembling breath. Mason began to cry without making a sound. Around them, the other pups shifted closer as warmth rolled over their bodies like a summer morning. Claire felt it leaving her, not painfully, but deeply, as if every hidden reserve of strength she had guarded for herself was being poured into the children. Her vision blurred. Her head grew heavy. Still, she smiled when Emma's little fingers curled around her dress. "That is it," Claire murmured. "Keep breathing." Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, 9 pups slept beneath a circle of silver light, and Claire stayed awake as long as she could, counting their breaths until the numbers faded into darkness. At Blackwood Palace, the truth did not arrive as a shout. It arrived as a scent. Nathaniel stood alone in Claire's abandoned chamber long after the court had gone quiet, holding one of the sealed letters that had condemned her. The room still carried traces of her presence: lavender soap, dried chamomile, the faint sweetness of winter roses she kept near the window because she said even cold places deserved something soft. He had come there because anger had finally burned low enough for doubt to survive. At first, the chamber had only deepened his guilt. Her wardrobe remained untouched. Her favorite shawl was folded over the chair. On the writing desk, beneath a stack of healing notes and old pack records, he found a list written in Claire's careful hand: convoy shelters to inspect before first snow, pup blankets to replace, fever herbs for northern nursery, extra guards requested for frostpine route. Nathaniel read the last line twice. Then a third time. Extra guards requested for frostpine route. His hand tightened around the paper. Claire had not ignored the convoy. She had warned someone it was vulnerable. A soft knock came at the open door. Ruth, the old maid, stood in the hallway with her shoulders drawn tight, her face pale but determined. "Your Majesty," she said, voice trembling, "I know it is not my place." Nathaniel looked up. "Speak." Ruth swallowed. "My lady asked for more guards 2 days before the hearing. I heard her tell Lady Vanessa that the pups should not travel with so few escorts. Lady Vanessa said the matter had already been handled." The room became colder than the winter outside. "Why did you not say this before?" Ruth's eyes filled, but she did not look away. "Because no one asked those of us who served her. They only asked those who wanted her gone." Nathaniel felt the words land where no blade ever had. Quiet. Precise. Deserved. He turned back to the letters, brought one close, and breathed in slowly. Beneath Claire's familiar seal was another scent, faint but unmistakable now that he had stopped letting rage speak first. Rose oil. Pearl powder. Vanessa Hale. And beneath that, something wilder, rougher, a trace from beyond the border, the scent of strangers who had no place near royal documents. Nathaniel moved before the thought fully formed. He crossed the corridor, descended the west stairs, and entered the archive where patrol records were kept under silver lock. Captain Rowan met him there, startled awake by the summons. Together, they broke open the route ledger. The original Frostpine convoy path had been changed in a hand that imitated Claire's, but not perfectly. Claire curved her capital letters like old script. This hand pressed too hard. Too sharp. Too eager to be believed. Nathaniel stared at the page while every moment in the throne room returned to him, Claire's steady voice, Vanessa's wounded eyes, his own pride dressed up as justice. "Find Lady Vanessa," he said. Captain Rowan bowed. "And the former Luna?" Nathaniel's silver-gray eyes lifted, no longer cold, but burning with something far more dangerous than anger. "She is not former anything." Within 20 minutes, the palace erupted into motion. Horses were saddled. Search lanterns were lit. Royal guards gathered beneath the archway as snow swept across the courtyard in white sheets. Vanessa was found near the eastern gate with travel gloves already on, claiming she had planned to visit a sick cousin before dawn. Nathaniel did not argue with her. He did not raise his voice. He simply stepped close enough for her smile to disappear and held up the forged letter. "You will ride with us," he said. "And if Claire is harmed because of this, lie, every pack in the north will hear your name before sunrise." Vanessa's face went still. That was all the answer he needed. The search began at the Western Service Road where Ruth had last watched Claire vanish into the snow. Nathaniel shifted between man and wolf as the trail demanded, following what little remained of her scent through wind-broken pines and frozen brush. Twice, the storm erased the path. Twice, something pulled him onward, not evidence, not command, but the bond he had believed his own words could sever. Near the ravine, he found the silver scarf tied to a branch, stiff with frost, Claire's scent wrapped around it like a final message. His chest tightened so hard he had to close his eyes. "She led them away," Captain Rowan said softly. Nathaniel opened his eyes and looked toward the slope, where faint warmth touched the air despite the cold. "No," he whispered. "She led them away from something." Then he heard it, barely more than breath beneath the storm. A child murmuring in sleep. Nathaniel climbed toward the hidden cave, every step slower than the last, because some part of him already knew what he would find and feared he had arrived too late. Nathaniel pushed through the curtain of roots and ice, and the cave opened before him like a secret the mountain had been holding until the last possible breath. For a moment, no one spoke. The guards behind him stopped at the entrance. Captain Rowan lowered his lantern. Even Vanessa, pale and shaking beneath her fur-lined hood, went silent as the silver glow inside the cave touched every face. The light came from Claire. She lay curled on the stone floor with 9 pups tucked against her, her arms wrapped around them as if she had built a shelter from nothing but her body and her will. Frost clung to her hair. Her borrowed coat had been torn into smaller coverings and tucked over little shoulders. Her dress was damp from melted snow. The Luna mark on her wrist pulsed softly, still giving warmth long after she had lost the strength to open her eyes. Nathaniel stepped forward, but Mason woke at the sound of his boots and sat up fast, blocking Claire with both small arms spread wide. "Do not touch her." The words were frightened, but they were brave. Nathaniel lowered to one knee at once. The movement seemed to shock everyone more than a command would have. "I will not hurt her," he said. Mason's eyes moved over his face, searching for the truth children can feel before adults admit it. "She said the king would come late sometimes," Mason whispered. "She said we still had to keep breathing." Nathaniel swallowed, and the pain in his throat felt like winter glass. She was right. One by one, the pups stirred. Lily lifted her head from Claire's side. Sophie clutched the edge of the torn cloak. Noah held his wooden toy wolf with both hands as if it had survived the night with him. Emma, the smallest, slept with her fingers curled around Claire's sleeve. Captain Rowan stepped in slowly, his voice gentle as he began guiding the children toward warm blankets and waiting arms. "You are safe now. We are taking you home." But Mason did not move. He looked past Nathaniel toward Vanessa, and his face changed. The child's fear sharpened into recognition. "That lady," he said, pointing with a trembling hand. She was at the wagon road. Vanessa recoiled as if the words had struck the air from her. "He is confused. He is a child." They were terrified. Mason shook his head hard. "She told the drivers the route was changed. She said the Luna ordered it. Then she left before the storm got bad." The cave went utterly still. Vanessa's mouth opened, but no graceful lie came fast enough. Lily's small voice followed from beneath a blanket. "Claire said not to be scared of the dark. She said bad people like secrets, but the moon likes truth." Nathaniel turned his head slowly. The look he gave Vanessa was not wild, not loud, not cruel. It was the look of a king who had finally seen the exact shape of betrayal. "You used her name," he said. Vanessa clasped her hands. "Your Majesty, I only wanted to protect the kingdom from a weak Luna who made you vulnerable." Nathaniel rose to his full height, and the cave seemed smaller around him. "Weak?" His voice was quiet enough that every wolf leaned closer to hear it. He looked down at Claire, at the pup still breathing because of her. At the torn coat, the empty herb pouch, the silver mark burning through exhaustion. She saved 9 children after her kingdom abandoned her. Vanessa's eyes filled with panic. "I served you." "No," Nathaniel said. "You served your ambition and called it loyalty." He turned to Captain Rowan without looking away from Claire. "Lady Vanessa Hale will be escorted back under royal watch. She will speak before the council at sunrise, and the pups will be heard without fear." Vanessa tried to protest, but Rowan's guards moved around her with calm, firm restraint. No shouting. No spectacle. Only consequence. Nathaniel knelt beside Claire again. His hand hovered over her cheek, then gently brushed away a strand of frozen hair. Her lashes did not lift, but her breathing was there, faint and stubborn. "Claire," he whispered, and this time he said her name not as a king, not as an alpha, but as a man who had arrived late to the truth and found mercy still breathing in front of him. "I am here." Emma stirred, opened sleepy eyes, and murmured, "She said you would find us." Nathaniel gathered Claire carefully into his arms, wrapping his own coat around her before the cold could reach her again. The Luna mark flared once, bright as dawn, and every pup in the cave grew quiet. Nathaniel bowed his head over Claire's hand. "Then let the moon hear me now," he said softly. "I will spend the rest of my life proving she was right." By the time the royal party reached Blackwood Palace, the storm had softened into pale morning snow. Servants gathered in the courtyard as Nathaniel crossed beneath the archway with Claire in his arms, his black coat wrapped around her, her face resting against his chest as if even unconscious she had finally found warmth again. No one spoke at first. The same palace that had watched her leave alone now watched her return carried by the king himself, followed by 9 pups wrapped in blankets and escorted like honored heirs. Ruth stood near the steps with both hands pressed to her mouth, tears shining on her cheeks. Nathaniel stopped before the gathered court, his silver-gray eyes moving across every noble, every guard, every servant who had heard the rumors. And chosen silence because silence was easier than courage. "Look carefully," he said, his voice low, but it carried through the courtyard like the first bell of judgment. "This is the Luna you called weak. This is the woman you let walk into winter alone. While we protected our pride, she protected our children." Mason stepped forward from Captain Rowan's side, still wrapped in a wool blanket far too large for him. "She gave us her coat," he said, small voice shaking but clear. "She told us stories so we would not sleep too deep. She counted our breathing." When Emma got quiet, Claire made the moonlight come back. Emma, held in Ruth's arms now, reached one tiny hand toward Claire. The courtyard changed in that moment. Not loudly. Not all at once. Shame moved through the wolves like a cold wind finding every open door. Heads lowered. Eyes dropped. Some who had laughed in the throne room now stared at the snow as though it could hide them. Nathaniel turned toward Vanessa, who stood under guard at the edge of the steps, her perfect blue gown wrinkled from the long ride, her face stripped of every graceful mask. "Lady Vanessa Hale," he said, "you will answer before the full council for forging royal orders, endangering pack children, and slandering your Luna." Vanessa lifted her chin, but her voice failed before it became a defense. The pups had already spoken. The forged letters had already been found. And Claire, silent in Nathaniel's arms, was proof no lie could soften. "Take her inside," Nathaniel ordered Captain Rowan. "Not to a dungeon. To a guarded chamber. Let her be treated with more fairness than she gave Claire, because Blackwood justice will not become cruelty to punish cruelty." That command cut deeper than rage ever could. The court heard it. The children heard it. Even Vanessa heard it. Then Nathaniel carried Claire into the palace, not through the servants' entrance where she had left, but through the great front doors beneath the silver wolf banners. In the royal healing room, fires were lit high, warm stones were placed around the bed, and the best healers in the kingdom worked with quiet urgency. Nathaniel never left her side. He sat beside the bed through the morning and into the gold edge of afternoon, one hand wrapped around hers, his thumb resting near the faintly glowing Luna mark. When Claire finally stirred, her lashes fluttered like she was climbing back from a very distant dream. Nathaniel leaned forward at once. "Claire." Her eyes opened slowly, blue-gray and tired, but alive. For a second, she looked confused by the silk pillows, the firelight, the royal chamber. Then she saw him. Pain passed across her face before hope dared follow it. "The pups," she whispered. Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly, as if that was the answer he deserved from her first breath. "Alive. All 9. Because of you." A tear slipped down her temple into her hair. "I did not betray you." His hand tightened around hers, careful, reverent. "I know." The words were not enough. Nothing would ever be enough for the moment he had failed her. So Nathaniel lowered himself from the chair to his knees beside her bed, the alpha king of the northern packs bowing where no court could misunderstand if they entered. "I trusted fear over you," he said. "I listened to noise and ignored your silence. I cannot undo the night you spent alone. But before the moon, the court, and every child you saved, I swear I will restore your name, your place, and every honor stolen from you." Claire looked at him for a long moment. Her fingers, weak but warm now, curled around his. "Do not restore me because you feel guilty," she whispered. "Restore truth because the kingdom needs it." Nathaniel's breath trembled. Then, for the first time since the storm began, he smiled through the ache. "That is why you were always my Luna." Outside the window, the 9 pups waited in the snow-bright courtyard, each holding a small white winter rose Ruth had given them. When Claire was strong enough to be carried to the balcony, the entire court knelt below her, not because Nathaniel commanded it, but because truth had finally become impossible to ignore. The Luna mark on her wrist glowed softly in the daylight, no longer dim, no longer hidden, and across Blackwood Palace, the bells began to ring.